Hello everyone, today I'm going to talk about the hypothetical possibility of stealth satellites on the background of presenting some of the wilder, though very unlikely but hypothetically possible and more interesting theories as to what could be behind the whole Zuma situation, but I'll generally detach it from that specific news topic and talk more about the hypothetical physics behind it. Now I might start with a brief intro and a little side recommendation, as it's fitting to the thematic and the notion that stealth in space would be impossible. Now I have been watching a lot of Isaac Arthur lately, and I can generally recommend his YouTube channel. He does great videos about slightly more far future or theoretical topics like the Fermi paradox, future megastructures, the possibilities of future space warfare, and these are really interesting, and he does seem to have quite a good capability of thinking through these topics logically. He does have really good points, and does mention a lot of things that I personally also think to be interesting points that are often overlooked. And if you discuss such far future theoretical topics a lot, or specifically if you listen to his channel a lot, then you might have heard of the notion that stealth in space is impossible, which is true to a certain extent, and at least in this context, but then on the other hand, stealth in general is impossible, and to make this a bit more precise, perfect stealth is impossible, and stealth against a very advanced technology is impossible. So if we are talking about far future space warfare between some armadas of spaceships with high-tech equipment which is closer to the actual physical limit rather than our current engineering skills, then this is true, but then stealth in general would be impossible. And in fact, you see this with any type of stealth, that there is no perfect stealth. It's always more or less advanced, not really perfect, but better than nothing. If you look at stealth bombers, they're not invisible on radar. They're just incredibly hard to see on radar. They don't reflect no radar beams. They reflect very little radar beams. In fact, for most stealth bombers, the amount of radar they reflect is comparable to that of a small bird, maybe. So they are pretty hard to overlook, but they're not perfectly stealthy. Camouflage in general doesn't make you invisible, it makes you hard to spot, and even some of the more futuristic or theoretical or clever ideas of how to cloak yourself, they don't make you perfectly invisible, they make you almost perfectly invisible. Someone with a really good sensor or camera who knows what to look out for or has a lot of computing power is still gonna be able to find you. And it's the same here, and for the series of designs I'm going to propose, they would, for example, be really easy to spot if you look at them from the wrong angle, which of course could happen if they get into a battle with some spaceship armada, but usually satellites are seen from below, from the ground with a telescope, so that makes it a lot easier in this case. And they're not invisible either, they're just hard to spot for average equipment, which is a huge improvement over other satellites. Because currently satellites are pretty easy to spot, and even supposedly secret military satellites are usually seen by amateur astronomers, and on average it takes a 2 weeks, sometimes just 1 week, until a supposedly secretive government satellite is spotted by amateur astronomers and tracked, and we know exactly where it is. Now, of course, in general, spaceflight is almost impossible to keep secret. You can't keep a rocket launch secret as such, as it is a very energetic event, but you can keep the exact orbital parameters you're launching towards secret. And currently, the main way that satellites are being spotted is just by reflecting sunlight. They're shiny, they're bright, they're big, they reflect sunlight. They look like a little dot in the sky, a little bit like a moving star if you don't know exactly what to look for, and through a telescope you can easily track them. So one of the first things you might want to do is add a lower side that is darker. Now you can still have your satellite design that works well on the upper side, since they're only being seen from below and to a certain angle, so you can basically add a little cover or sheet that is dark black, absorbs all light. Most sunlight would be enough for a start, and that would already make it pretty hard to spot these satellites through a simple telescope. If that material is relatively well made and the shape isn't too stupidly designed, it would also help against a laser tracking or a laser ranging. Of course, you're still not going to match the background, but the background is usually mostly dark too if you don't have a really good telescope, so it would already hide you from most simple telescopes, which are also the telescopes most useful for finding secret satellites, because you need to cover a large amount of sky in order to find a secret satellite, so you can't use a really high precision telescope to do so. Then in addition you might want to add a bigger battery so that you can run your solar panels only while the sun is really above or in a certain range above the satellite, not at evening or morning, but really only in the noon, so that the part of light that gets reflected off solar panels doesn't have a chance to hit Earth or other satellites at similar altitudes, so that it's harder to spot an iridium flare. And you might add a diamond shape to that cover or make it from radar absorbing materials so that you don't get spotted by radar. And if you want to get fancy, now it's hard to imitate the exact background, the exact stars, but it's also going to be rather rare that you pass exactly in front of a bright star. So you might start imitating some of your background. If you're going to absorb radar anyways, you might also put in a tiny radio and microwave beacon or beam that is relatively weakly powered and roughly imitates the overall temperature of the background. This is a lot easier than imitating the optical background, as these are easier to spot in terms of intensity but generally blurrier, so it's easier to just imitate one color or one background rather than imitating the exact shape of things behind you, which of course is difficult if you don't have precisely directed beams and many of them or know exactly where your observer is. Now you'd still need some part of your satellite peeking behind that cover for the actual purpose of the satellite. Any satellite stealth could even be remotely considered for would be an Earth observing satellite or a precision communication satellite, but these are parts that have to peek out behind the cover, can be scaled down so that most of the equipment is hidden, and they can be directed pretty well, and depending on where exactly you direct them and what exactly is the purpose of the satellite, you can use different designs where the cover is aimed in different directions and you basically peek out sideways, and now you could have a lot of different structural or shape designs where you peek out in different directions or have different kinds of covering. And with laser communications, you could mostly hide your communications equipment pretty well, even if it has to peek out, it would be relatively small. And for Earth observation, it's also not that hard to design a camera or telescopic lens that way that it doesn't reflect anything, because really the main problem here is reflecting sunlight. So as long as your optics and mechanics design covers that, you can actually have quite a big lens peeking around behind that cover. And again, it's not perfect stealth, but it helps against most of the things that currently detect the kinds of satellites that try to stay secret. And while I don't think it's an especially wise idea, the concept remains somewhat viable, so there is a chance that someone might be secretly working on it or launching some, and that makes it a possible hypothetical answer to the Zuma situation and other mysterious satellite projects, although the most likely answer to the Zuma situation is still that it just failed to separate from the upper stage and went back into the Earth's atmosphere and burned up. But there are a few wild theories that are much more fun to consider and possible though unlikely. I hope you found this little introduction into the non-perfect but possible idea behind one concept to build stealth satellites somewhat interesting. If you have any questions about spaceflight or physics, I'm always open for any questions or requests. I might in the future start covering some slightly more theoretical or far future concepts, and I may also start responding to some of the science related YouTubers I watch in this format. However, my next video will be about coincidence and statistics now in the context of plane crashes and reliability management, and I've still got a few on ice series and ideas to finish. You can still ask me any question in the comments though, and as always, thanks for watching.